it's impious. The God, the Supreme Lord Himself. No, we're talking about the devotion that actually has these two pieces, and that is unmotivated and does not ask anything of the Supreme Lord. So, when we're talking about this life of this kind of devotion, what kinds of ways do we see with everyone else? Well, like what examples do we see in the scriptures, and what examples do we see in the lives of our sampradaya? What I want to first do is show you a clip, a song that Bhaktivinoda Thakur had written from Gitavali. And this specifically refers to the fourth verse of Sikshashtakam. And so, Bhattahari Prabhu had actually written it and sang the first four verses. So we'll listen to the first four verses. But there's also another part of it, as you can see here, and we'll talk through that before we go on. So, listen carefully. I'll keep this up right here so you can at least see what the words and the translations are. But we'll listen to Bhattahari Prabhu sing this. So again, this is for the fourth verse of Sikshashtakam, written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. This is just an expansion of what that means to Bhaktivinoda Thakur.
से जे जे जन्म पाए निज कर्म गुणाद से जे जे जन्म पाए जन्मे जन्मे जेनो तवा जन्मे जन्मे जेनो तवा नाम गुण गाए नाम गुण गाए प्रभु तवा पद युगे आशा ममा तुम्हारा चराने मात्र आशा ममा तुम्हारा चराने और तुकी बाती
So you can see here that this verse, it really encapsulates and kind of expands on the mood of this fourth verse of Shikshashtakam. It's just an expansion of this feeling that really comes about. And if you actually look at it, there's actually more to this song than Bhadda Hari Prabhu actually sings on the track. If you look at the translation, you might guess why. Public consumption and all that. But could we maybe have somebody just read out the translations for these last four verses there?
Let me love your lotus feet as much as I now love sense gratification. Transfer my affection from the objects of the senses to your lotus feet. In danger or success, good fortune or disaster, let me remain in equipoise. And let my affection for you increase day by day by the influence of the holy name. Whether I live as a bird or a beast, in heaven or in hell, let the humble Bhakti Vinod always cherish Bhakti in his heart of hearts.
Thank you. So, if you look at the entirety of this song, these four verses here and those three verses on the next page, you can actually see it's just Bhaktivinoda Thakur just coming down from truly a realized platform and just explaining what a life of devotion looks like at kind of a more neophyte stage. This idea, realistically it's not quite a neophyte stage, but the idea of taking a look at, right, it doesn't matter where I am, it doesn't matter what I do, I don't want these things, I want something else. And if you take a look at each of the verses, they actually go back into the six sanghas of devotion, six sanghas of surrender. So if we see in the first verse, he's saying, okay, I don't want some things. I don't want something, so I'm rejecting the things that are not favorable towards devotional service. Don't want anything. I only want some things, and the things that are conducive towards devotional service. And so he only asks really for hearing and chanting specifically. And you can see that. Then, additionally, you can see that he accepts Lord Krishna as his Lord and Master, just transferring things from currently what he thinks is just sense gratification to the Lord's lotus feet, and accepting the Lord as his Master. And so similarly, you can see that at the end, he even says, okay, let the humble Bhakti Vinod. So this Bhakti Vinod Thakur's song includes all these angas of devotion, of surrender. So you can see that it's just another expansion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Shikshashtakam, but also includes this idea that this is pure surrender. So, this is just one example of what devotion might look like. I also want to go into just a couple more examples from the scriptures, just again as part of our connections for things that we know already. Maharaj has already gone into this, and I'm pretty sure the Veera Prabhu has as well. So I'm just going to very quickly go over what Prahlad Maharaj had mentioned. But this is the same verse that everyone quotes. This main important thing is, of course, this life of devotion. Prahlad Maharaj very concisely explains what that means. Life, in his mind, it really means truly from the very beginning of life, the beginning to the end of life, the entirety of that life should be spent in this devotion. Why? Because this dullabhan manusham janma, because it's very hard earned to get this human form of life. And then it just so happens that we end up wasting it away and then we lose it. So again, another life of devotion means from the beginning of life to the end of life. Even earlier than the beginning of life, is just before even leaving the womb, is the story of Parikshit Maharaj. Can someone volunteer to read this paragraph that's right here? This is from the purport, Srila Prabhupada's purport to the bhajan, Jeev Jago. Anyone want to read this purport? Raise your hand. Nobody is? Okay. Somebody.
When Parikshit was in the womb of his mother, the son of Dronacharya, Ashwatthama, he released a weapon called Brahmastra. The Brahmastra could kill even within the womb. So at that time, Lord Krishna entered and saved the child. The child saw the form of Krishna and was remembering. And when the child came out, he was trying to find out where is that form. He was searching after Krishna. So the astrologers who were present there, they could understand that this child is seeking something. Therefore, his name was given Parikshit. Parikshit means one who is trying to test. Pariksha. Pariksha means test, examination.
Thank you very much. So you can see that in the case of Parikshit Maharaj, he also, full life of just searching in the devotion. In the beginning of his life, before even leaving the womb of his mother, Uttara, he had seen Krishna save him from the Brahmastra. And then upon leaving, he's just on constant search. And we all, of course, know that the end of his life is also quite glorious, because he had the fortune of hearing from Shukadev Goswami and sitting down and really understanding what does it mean to be truly in devotion. And so we have all these examples from the scriptures of devotees or of personalities who truly imbibe this sense of, I'm not asking anything of the Lord, but I'm spending my whole life in just engaging in these natural feelings, be they of awe and reverence, or if they just come spontaneously in the sense of Sakhya rasa, this friendship rasa, or parental rasa, or intimate love like the gopis. So I want to ask you guys to, with your groups, turn to each other, and now just kind of talk through, are there any other examples that you can think of from the scriptures or from people's pastimes that you've heard that are very similar, that are just other connections that you have already, that you know of something, that get this sense of a life of devotion. Devotion being described as we have before, and life as we've also described, based on the examples we've seen. So take about 5 minutes to do that, and we'll come back in a couple minutes. The ask is, in your groups, if you can discuss other examples of devotees or personalities who have truly had a life of devotion. And in the beginning we described devotion as not something that they've asked anything of the Lord and they've received it. And similarly we've looked at life as kind of the beginning, the very beginning of life to the end. It doesn't matter. You can take a look at it, yeah, like that, beginning to end. Any other examples you can think of? Another 30 seconds and we'll start sharing. All right, Advaita Charan Prabhu. Advaita Charan. All right, do we have any groups that would like to share? Just what you guys talked about over here.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So when you are asking about some great personality who shows the devotion, I remember once I was attending the yatra of His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj, and he told about disciple of Sri Ramanujacharya, who is Dasharathi, who is an exalted devotee, surrendered soul, expert in the philosophy, and very good at speaking and debate, arguments, and he could do anything to prove that devotion is the greatest. Is that okay, or should I go? I don't know.
That's an example, yeah, thank you.
You want me to go into little details of that example, Prabhu?
If you wish or not.
Okay, fine. So, once Srila Ramanujacharya got a disciple or a devotee who approached there, and that a lady who got married quite recently and struggling with her mother-in-law, okay, with various kinds of problems, and she was crying before him, saying that I don't have any hope, I don't have a proper life, I am being treated as a servant in this family, not as a daughter-in-law, and I'm struggling and suffering. I remember that, Srila Ramanujacharya says to her that I will send you one assistant, don't worry about that. All the activities what you need, you can use this assistant in your service so that you can please your mother-in-law, etc. And then he sends this great personality called Dasharathi to that village. Okay, in those days people used to know people by names, not by the faces and all. And this great personality was instructed by his spiritual master to go to their house, be a humble servant and please the whole family. And it so happens that for months together he serves, he takes all the sufferings from her mother-in-law, and he has to go all the way along to take the water from the well and come back and so on and so forth. And for months together he never reveals that he is a great knowledgeable person in the Vedas or the scriptures. He never tells that he is a disciple of Ramanujacharya. He keeps living a very humble servant life. And one time he was passing through a group of all these sadhus who were discussing on the philosophy and on the Vedanta Sutras, and repeatedly he has been hearing some wrong message given by a teacher who was teaching to the other disciples or whoever it is. He could not tolerate. One day, after many times, then he said, no, this is not the Shastra, has to be understood this way, it has to be understood that way, and then he passes immediately from that side. And then from there, people did not understand, hey, this person seems to be only a servant of that house, but then how he is knowledgeable, because the Brahmanas were surprised and astonished to see that how can an ordinary person can speak on this highest platform of Vedic scriptures, pointing out, saying that this has some other meaning.
Sure.
So
Thank you.
that's it, Prabhu. Thank you.
Any other groups who'd like to share just very quickly?
So our group had 3 examples: Dhruv Maharaj, Queen Kunti, and Jada Bharat.
Sure. And it goes between lives for Jadabharat, so multiple lifetimes of devotion.
We thought about Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, namely how Srila Prabhupada, he was born as a devotee, and how his Krishna consciousness, and he never asked Krishna for anything. He just said he just was going on the instruction of his spiritual master, and then he came and started the International Society for Krishna Consciousness.
Sure.
And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, of how since a young age he was so strong in his philosophy and following Krishna that it was just so exemplary for everyone who was just watched him. So.
Sure. Makes sense. Okay. Thank you all very much for sharing. So this is our connection sake. We'll come back, don't worry. There's more group activities. All right, so we're going to move on to this next thought, and it's the idea of this concept. This is in more newer information. So we just had connections as to things we already knew, and now we're adding in more newer information into what we would like to learn. So let's take a look at some quotes from the Bhagavad Gita, just because it's a great summary way of what Krishna himself has said with regards to this idea of a life of devotion. So let's pretend for 1 minute that we take a very strict definition of life. As Krishna says, even if you think that the soul will always be born and die forever, you still have no reason to lament. And that lamentation is really towards both the living as well as the dead. And so this idea is really just focusing the mind fully and solely on material activities. And so this is, even if this is it, you're born today, you die tomorrow, and that's it, finito. Still you should have this sense of devotion. You should still go forward with this life of devotion. So if you also take a look at this next quote. So we take a look at, a man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad reactions in this life. Therefore, strive for yoga, which is the art of all work. And so we see that this devotional service really gets rid of all this material senses of what is good, what is bad, and it solely focuses on the true devotional service towards the Supreme Lord. I like this phrase, the art of all work, because you can see it's truly just kind of the pinnacle. It's an expression of what work really should be. It should be an expression of what life should be. So, and then finally, by thus engaging in devotional service to the Lord, great sages or devotees free themselves from the results of work in the material world. In this way, they become free from the cycle of birth and death and attain the state beyond all miseries. So we can see that this devotional service is something that is of use. And so this life of devotion has some sort of benefit to us. We shouldn't be really chasing after these benefits per se, but as a result of, kind of as an extra, there's still some benefits that are attained. So if we're looking at the Bhagavad Gita as well, let's say this life isn't enough. Let's say this life we're done and for some reason we fall away or we aren't able to reach the goal, as Arjuna has also said, what happens? There's no loss or diminution. So this sense of life of devotion just continues. It may not just be this one life of devotion, maybe multiple lifetimes of devotion. The idea is that this life of devotion, in some senses, you're taking the life of the soul, which is infinite. And so it's really truly just the entirety of our existence becomes devotion. At the same time, we also have to pay attention to the fact that, okay, let's say in this life, we're almost there, somehow, by some measure, we are very close to becoming some pure servant of the Lord. That's still, there has to be this element of mercy. In addition to the endeavor that we ourselves take, it still is the mercy of Krishna himself who gives us this final kind of kick over the hump to say, okay, yes, you are truly a pure devotee of the Lord. And so we have this sense of, okay, yes, we must endeavor, of course, with our life of devotion, but we must also pay attention to the fact that it's not that we endeavor with this goal in mind, we don't endeavor with this ask of Krishna, because it is completely unconditional devotion. So this unconditional devotion and this life that we exist, combined together with the mercy that Krishna gives us this sense of what is this life of devotion. So, however, we are human beings. We are not all of us maybe, not all of us are great, exalted devotees who have chapters written about us in the Bhagavatam. And we forget things. And so if we go back to Parikshit Maharaja's story, you take a look at the baby within the womb of Uttara. Realistically, Srila Prabhupada mentions that this same story sort of happens to all of us. At the 7th month of gestation, when consciousness just develops with the baby prays to the Supreme Lord, please relieve me from this awkward position. And in this life, I'll actually make sure to practice Krishna consciousness. But then the baby is born, he cries, the parents take care of him, and then he forgets. And so we get into this cycle of, all right, we realize this right as soon as consciousness develops within the womb. And then we are born and then we forget. And then we live a life of complete forgetfulness. And then we have to go through it all over again. And then, as Prahlad Maharaj had said, we get this hard-earned human life back. Durlabha manasham janma, right? So we have this sense of, we promise to Krishna before we're even born, yes, okay, I'll go ahead and pay attention to you. And then we get out there and then we forget. And so we go on this cycle and cycle and cycle. Not of just birth and death, which of course is there, but this idea of just realization and forgetfulness. And so what we need to do is make sure that we just break this. And it's taking this sort of naive realization of the soul just in the womb. And then as soon as we're born, forgetting it. And then eventually reawakening and truly realizing this love of Krishna, this devotion. So this is also what our job is to now take our lives and move from just this first promise we originally made, forgot about it, and then reawakening it. And then this reawakening of this promise truly does last then. It's a stronger sense of what devotion is then. So, let us then move on to kind of practicing what this sense of, what does this life of devotion mean? What we want to do is we want to set this foundation, get this concrete block, and build this building of devotion. And so what does that mean for all of us? Why do sort of a lifetime of devotion? Why even bother with this? And that's what we want to go through and exercise with all of your groups. And I want each of you guys to talk about why dedicate a life, truly a full life to devotion. And if this could be why you dedicate your life to devotion, this could be, I don't, but I have some examples within the scripture that I think are kind of nice to aspire to. So within your groups, take a look, talk to each other, and talk about why dedicate a life to devotion. So why, in the first place, would you take your whole life to just dedicate towards this unconditional service towards the Supreme Lord? Each of your groups, I'll ask to kind of come back here. We'll explain, we'll kind of put this into here, and this will kind of be a nice takeaway type thing for you guys later. Yes? Yes, each group comes up with one, and we'll talk about it. Let's take 10 minutes just to talk through this. So if you can make sure you collapse your reason into a couple words or something, you can see keyword or keywords, and one word or some small phrase, something short that'll fit on one line here. And then some short description which will help expand what you mean. All right, another 2 minutes to kind of tighten up and confirm what you want to talk about. Okay, another 30 seconds. We'll share in a minute. Okay, so what I'd like is 5 groups to share their phrase and some short description. And I'll put it right on the screen right here, right now. So we'll have something that we can keep afterwards. All right. Ladies first, ladies first. You'll come back, don't worry. And if somebody steals your answer or says their answer before you, come up with another one.
Okay, so our keyword is truth. And we said truth because it's the only thing that's true to our identity. And because it's true to our identity, it's truly satisfying. It's the only thing that's lasting and fully satisfying.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Okay. Wait, they had wanted first. All right, go ahead.
Well, enjoyment or happiness, which is unlimited and everlasting. Oh, ever increasing, sorry. Unlimited. Either enjoyment or happiness. Enjoyment. Where is it?
Or enjoyment, not happiness. Okay.
Yeah, either one, same thing. And it's unlimited and ever increasing.
What's your description?
We don't have a description. Well, ours is lasting happiness. Wait, no.
No, we get our own thing.
Yeah, ours is our own thing. The green one.
No, that's not fair. Come up with a different one.
Wait, okay. Permanent. Yes. That, yes. Wait. Okay.
Yeah, I think it falls under the same category. All right, any other groups? Is that a reason?
Inspiration from the real life examples.
So that's why inspiration. So we follow other people because we saw their examples.
Yeah, Guru Maharaj. Yeah, we were just thinking about it.
Okay, thank you.
It's the relationship with the devotees.
That's why it's because you have a relationship.
Yeah.
And we feel that we are not alone, we are moving together, and it gives a sense of connection. Togetherness, yes. Connection.
Okay. If I can spell. Okay, thank you. Next group.
The 3 different groups raising hands.
Choose a group, anyway. You go ahead.
Prabhu, for us, peace, Prabhu.
Peace.
Peace. Being peaceful in life.
Can you describe that a little bit?
Yes, Prabhu. Through chanting, we found peace in life.
And
That's
so,
one of them.
Because it's peaceful, that's why you follow a life of devotion.
That's one of the reasons.
Okay. Any other groups? Some other groups? Yeah, go ahead.
Being grateful, irrespective of whatever platform we belong to, because we are eventually grateful to Krishna for whatever we are.
So gratitude. You're grateful for receiving this process, or just grateful for what? For just existing. Okay.
To rejoin our relation, to have a relationship with Lord Krishna. To have a relationship with God and be His friend.
Okay.
Our group's backup, fearlessness.
That's why you want to dedicate a life to devotion?
Yeah.
Because you're fearless, therefore that's why.
No, it gives, you become
To get
fearless.
fearlessness.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can come with peace if you want, but
Don't worry, I'll clean it up. At least let's get the information. Yes?
Shelter, to get shelter, dedicating a life of to devotion, to get the shelter of the Supreme Lord, so one can be growing and happy in that unfailable shelter provided by Him and His devotees.
Sure, so that kind of falls into that same idea of just that general sense of peace, of shelter, fearlessness, all that.
No, what did I say? Give me answer. You speak.
Empowerment.
Okay.
And life of devotion helps us overcome impurities. So in that way, we get empowered.
Can't hear you.
Life of devotion helps us overcome impurities.
Impurities.
So it leads to empowerment.
Okay, last one. To some group that hasn't spoken yet. Over there. Or have you? They haven't gone yet either.
So this is from Mataji here. No, and it is a very good one. So we have this unique opportunity of a life as human being with our intelligence that Krishna has given us. So we should dedicate our life because we are not in the form of any other creatures who are not able to think. So we should dedicate our life to Krishna.
If you guys want to share.
To purify our existence.
Okay, any last comments or anything before we move on? Use the mic.
Get empowerment from Krishna.
Get
empowerment from Krishna.
Empowerment from Krishna. Got it. Yeah, one last one. Okay. So the reason is you'd be empowered, and that's why you dedicate your life to Krishna. Because you're already empowered, so therefore you can do it. So it's easy peasy. Okay? All right. So we can see that there are different examples and reasons we kind of see as normal human beings that we might try to aspire for this life of devotion, to actually spend our entire life engaging in this unalloyed, unconditional, natural feeling, as to use Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's words, towards Krishna. All right, so what I want to do is go into an example of one person, more contemporary, who also, as we mentioned kind of when we were going through our examples, who also went through just this full life of devotion, and that is Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And so what I want to do is just kind of give this sense of what this life of devotion looks like in someone more recent, or someone who may not seem so far away as someone like Prahlad Maharaj or someone like Parikshit Maharaj. And so, even still, after seeing this, you will still feel like this is very far away. But at least it's something that seems a bit more down, like more something that we can actually aspire to and actually get toward. So, I want to just kind of go through and give a quick biography of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He's the one that wrote Sharanagati. He's the one that wrote that Gitavali song that we listened to. He's the father of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He's in our sampradaya, so it just makes sense to kind of listen to see one example of a life of devotion as given by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, just going to work even, you can see just what kind of person he was. Every aspect of his life was still tied back into his devotional life. So even though he would wear his coats and pants and everything proper as uniform, he would also wear his double-sized tulsi beads and then wear his tilak before even going into the court. And because Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was such a personality, he would be able to listen to an argument and immediately be able to come to a decision, and would be, and as such, was a very respected and frankly almost sometimes feared, like, high court judge within the British regime. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was born in 1838, which is before the American Civil War for the Americans. And then he left this world just as World War I was starting. So you can kind of place yourself historically to see how long ago Bhaktivinoda Thakur had lived. In this photo you can actually see that this is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's family. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur right here. This is from 1900, I think. And this is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and then his other children, his wife, etc. So you can see that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had such strong qualities to him. He never had any debts. He was very punctual as such. He spoke 7 languages, including English and Persian and Latin, in addition to, of course, Bengali. And it turns out that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was considered to be the Prahlad in the family of non-devotees. Because outside of his immediate family, who was his father was a very great devotee of Nityananda Prabhu, was just not really devotees at all. And you can see such a rare example of such a strong devotee coming out of an otherwise extended family that doesn't follow Krishna consciousness. So another thing that's very interesting about Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was his schedule. So if you look at it, you can see it's every day you might see just very little snippets of what his schedule looked like. If you look at it in total, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur slept about 3 hours a night and was writing from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. every single day. 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. So for 6 whole hours, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur would dedicate his life just towards writing and translating and transcribing and creating just documents and books and bhajans and everything for the rest of us to kind of be able to start to even go on this path of devotion. you can see that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was able to receive guests, still do everything that he needed to. He still worked about 8 hours a day, and that's very similar to what we might do, but he also had his time for translating works. He slept hardly any bit, and he ate a very, very, very simple meals. Just some chapatis and a milk in the morning with some fruits, and then similarly in the evening. It didn't look like he had any lunch or anything like that, but it just very, very, very simple life. And his life was solely dedicated to, and you can see in every single aspect of this, still tied back into devotional service in some way. Now, in addition to the schedule, which was an everyday thing, it's also important to take a look at Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur's life, kind of in a timeline really, to see what happened at the beginning, in the middle, and the end of his life. Because we're looking at Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur as a full example of a lifetime of devotion. So, when we start, you can see again, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was born in 1838, and at the age of 18 he had joined his college life, just like a number of us here. And what's interesting to note is that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, even at a young age, was still searching for God and searching for the truth. And as such, as part of this, he had actually taken a look into Christian theology, compared it against the Vaishnav theology, especially comparing against the monist Hinduism tradition, so the Advaita tradition of Shankaracharya, and looking at all of this. In addition to comparing it against the English literature of the day, because this is under British rule. If we look even further, then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur then took his position as a deputy magistrate. So taking a look at trying to fight corruption within government, and at the same time still was able to continue writing and wrote critically acclaimed poems, even in Bengali, that were just in addition to his work. If we move forward, then we take a look at the birth of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had actually prayed for a ray of Vishnu to come in and help him with the Krishna consciousness movement that he was truly trying to make sure that was continuing. He was fighting against the Apasapradayas, that the other groups that didn't consider the line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so in this life of devotion, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his 30s, in his middle age, was looking at just to share this life of devotion with others and make sure that it was done in a bona fide way. An interesting story about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is that once he had actually accidentally ate an unoffered mango. And just because in the family you can see the strength of the family of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is that because once Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had eaten an unoffered mango, he vowed never ever to eat a mango again, and he never did. And it was just because everything in his life was lined up and towards the devotional service of the Lord. So that means he did not take anything that was not already offered. Similarly, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had just, again, as we saw before in his writings, rejected everything that was not favorable towards this devotional service and only accepted the things that helped him. At the age of 43, he earned the title of Thakur. This Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this name, was actually bestowed upon him by others, given to him. He earned it, it's something as a result of all of his life of devotion. This powerful life, writing a number of things and giving lectures on the scriptures written previously by the previous acharyas, and again presenting Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's line as the way of devotion. He received this title of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Then, if we take a look at afterwards, in his kind of, again, middle age, and looking at this, the main thing was finding the birthplace of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So even after being a deputy magistrate, even after trying to retire in this age of 49, the British government said, no, you're too good, you can't leave. And so he had asked for a way to leave, to go somewhere else, and actually had set up a place and had his own railway kind of put together just for Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And so we see, in addition to all this excellent work that he was doing for the magistrate, he also was very much concerned with making sure that this line of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was maintained. And so one of the key activities that he did was actually to search for the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the story is kind of given here. One night, while still in government service, he had a dream which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to him and spoke. You will certainly go to Vrindavan, but first there's some service you must first perform in Navadvip. So what will you do about that? And upon awaking, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur just knew he had to find this birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In fact, going to this place of Navadvip, moving to this place as part of the magistrate, meant that because he was such a staunch and very well-respected magistrate, meant he gave up a lot of positions, including moving to Assam or helping out with other districts that may have been more prestigious. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur fully knew that this was his duty, this was his goal, this was his life. And so Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur had studied old manuscripts in Navadvip, had talked to the elders within Navadvip, and looked at old maps, and eventually came to a place that originally was not considered Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birthplace. Now his spiritual master, Sri Jagannath Das Babaji, had confirmed this, and the way that I remember hearing that was because he jumped out of his basket, that he was a very, very old person at that time, and started dancing, just knowing fully well that this was the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So you can see that this is such an important part of our devotional service continuing on after the time of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. But this is what he spent his life kind of doing. In addition to that, after finding out this place, confirming that this was indeed the actual birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was able to finally actually retire. What that meant was, though, not just stopping all work and kind of sitting on the beach and relaxing. What that meant was he then continued to give lectures about his investigation, where he found it, why he found it, convincing great, great learned people that yes, this is the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And even after retiring, Bhaktivinoda Thakur would also go just door to door begging for these places just to set up such a temple that we see today, Yogpith, within Mayapur, within Navadvip, just to set this up to show people, yes, this is the place of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birth. At the age of 72, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur then took the vow of Babaji, and eventually went into Samadhi. So, taking complete renunciation from the external world, taking the dress, and then shutting himself away from everyone else, just to be able to focus on reading, hearing, chanting. Even still, he traveled for a few more years to Puri and Vrindavan and all these places, just to continue with his life service of making sure that he was able to continue giving this gift of devotional service to others. And then in 1914, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur then left this world. So you can see that this life of devotion, from the beginning to the end, is another example of seeing what does this life of devotion mean. However, some of us may have come into Krishna consciousness not at the beginning of life. Some of us may be in families where we truly are the only devotees. Some of us may be in situations where we originally come to devotional service and now we're just becoming serious in it. And so, this is another discussion that I want you all to have, is to start taking a look at what does success in devotional service, what does a lifetime of devotion look like? You gave the reasons before, and now we're taking a look at what does it look like at every stage of life? What does it look like, what does a lifetime of devotion look like for a young child? What does a lifetime of devotion look like for a youth? What does it look like for someone in their adult age? And what does it look like for someone who's in their old age? And of course, we should keep in mind that this lifetime of devotion should be contextualized or put in the context of these 6 angas of surrender. So, with your groups, you can start talking about, I've kind of summarized all these 6 angas of surrender. So you can see, let me just go through them so you know. The first one, these first 2, as we mentioned, is accepting everything favorable in devotional service, and rejecting things that are unfavorable. The next part is making sure that we have firm conviction that Krishna is our protector. It's not that we follow the impersonal Brahman. It's not that we go through karma yoga or jnana yoga. We follow bhakti yoga and we follow firm conviction that Krishna is that person that we follow. Similarly, we accept Krishna as our master. Not that we're just we're protected by some powerful demigod, or we have some powerful spirits that protect us. No, that Krishna himself is the main source of our protection. Similarly, then, we have this surrender, this self-surrender. We become the Lord's property. This Atmanivedana. We offer our entire soul to the Supreme Lord. And finally, as we saw, we should be meek and humble. So this dainya, as we've mentioned before, this humility that comes about. So, again, it's what does a life devotion look for you? For you as an individual or just some general person within this modern age, what does it look like for someone who's really young, who someone is in adulthood, who someone who's old age, all stages of life, what does it look like? And we'll have a discussion on that. Okay? So let's take about 5 or 10 minutes just to talk with each other, and we'll come back together and we'll discuss what does a life devotion look like in a modern age at every stage. something important to note is that success is truly measured by the results. And so if we're looking at success at every stage, there should be some way of seeing what the results are at every stage as well. Just keep that in mind as you're discussing with your groups. Two more minutes. Another 30 seconds. Okay, so can we have groups who are ready to share just a little bit about what you discussed? We'll have everybody share, don't worry. Just a little bit about how you discussed. What does success look like for a life of devotion at every stage? Now, key important thing, some of us didn't get that, some of us don't see that, so don't feel bad. If you, as a little child or something, weren't able to get what exactly you wanted to say. So, and that's fine. All right, any groups that would like to start sharing? These guys up here. Up. Oh.
This time.
Well, it's a very broad topic.
It is.
So, I think we covered, like, if you're talking about infancy, then it depends on parents. And someone gave example of Prabhupada, like how he used to, do Rath Yatras as a child. And, we also saw some examples of kids doing kirtan just before this session. So, those are like some examples of how you can engage at that age in devotional service. Maybe you can talk about the teenage.
So then the next stage that we have is when children are, in the teenage years, they need guidance. So to make it conducive for them, the parents bring them to places where they can make friends, follow, have association, and follow Krishna consciousness in a nice way. And it becomes like a natural for them. It becomes an extension of whatever the parents are doing. So that's one part that we discussed.
Okay, in the later stage, we agreed, like, as a household, the responsibility is to deliver our dependence. And
Say
how
again?
we can do so.
Deliver your dependence, got it.
Yeah. So how you can do so is working in devotion, because you cannot, as a household, you cannot escape certain responsibilities. One of them is to earn, to go to work. So how our consciousness should be at work, or as a student too, like if you are studying household. So you should be very good student, you should be very good at work, because if you are working nice, then it should be pleasing to Krishna. The goal should be. So working in devotion is very important. Like for Arjuna, it was to fight in a battle. It was work in devotion. So the same way, wherever we are, as a household, we should work in devotion.
Old age is left.
Yeah, regarding old age, we also discussed that if you don't practice in your young age, then it's very difficult to take it up later. And I think we also heard from Maharaj that, death can come at any moment, so you are old in that sense. So you have to be always be in the boat of devotional service. And life of Prabhupada is an example of how one can be so active in old age, in spreading the movement. So.
One line was like, death can make anyone God conscious. So you will lose that interest, because you have now nothing to do. Whole life you have committed to something which was not relevant enough to take up. So it will be very difficult. So if you have practiced, if you have lived a life of devotion, as the topic of today is, then it will be natural for you to live a life of an example.
Sure, thank you. Other groups who would like to share? Up here.
We had a nice discussion on this. So basically we just concluded with, there's kind of a progression that happens throughout life where as a kid it's all about me. So basically the parent's role, the kid is just focused on themselves, and the parent's role is kind of to just stand back. And so at that stage, the life of devotion for a child is kind of just to be yourself. And then as you progress to a teenager or young adult, that's kind of the transitional phase where you've experienced freedom being yourself or whatever, and now you're kind of questioning and trying to see what you want actually, without the, I guess, the pressures. That's not exactly a good word, but I'm just going to use that. Pressures of your parents or your society or whatever. And then after you transition past that phase, then you reach like adulthood, and like all these Prabhus are all fathers. And their role, we were discussing, is basically just to give at this point. So it was a transition from I'm the focus to now by the time you're an adult and you're a father or parent, it's your dependents are the focus.
Similar to what they
Yeah. So, and yeah, I guess that's.
And then that's it, just fatherhood and life's over.
And you die, yeah.
One more point that came through the discussion was, as different stages of life progress, there is some sense of guidance or responsibility that happens, so that the individual is able to discover their self-worth or their place in the life of devotion. So they need some help in doing that. And if they are able to be of some, if they are able to bring some value and be appreciated, so that's what the life of devotion is more sustainable and keeps continuing.
And that's true. We see that in all the examples that we saw before. We have Parikshit Maharaj who had Shukadeva Goswami. We have Prahlad Maharaj who had Narad Muni. We have all these examples of people who end up having this some sort of guidance as they're continuing along, be that in the early stages of their life or their later stages. There's some sort of guidance that does help them then in some way. Thank you. Any other groups or anything that'd like to share? Someone over here? Dulshati.
We were thinking that in old age, you see a lot of death around you and a lot of people falling sick and things like that. And it requires so much surrender to feel that no matter what happens, even if something happens to me, even if I do pass away, my devotion is, nothing's going to happen to that. Krishna will preserve whatever devotion I've accumulated throughout this whole lifetime. So.
Thank you. Any other groups? Just behind, I think, was someone.
It's a very nice discussion, and what the points we came up, it's not really in terms of like the stages as the other groups are mentioning, but like how we can see the success at any stage. The first thing is, as other groups mentioned, parents' responsibility to give Krishna consciousness to children. Like when we are able to impart that into the children, then we can say, okay, we are able to practice that. And then the other point is ability to follow Guru's instructions. So in terms of accepting everything favorable, we should be able to nicely follow the instructions. The other thing is minimizing social relationships or association with non-devotees. Before starting Krishna consciousness, we may have many acquaintances or relations, and if you are able to give up those sort of I would say relationships, we can see that rejecting the things which are unfavorable. The next point is willingness to perform service happily and cooperatively, where we have this mood of gratitude for devotees, and it's actually connecting to the last point, humility, where we will have regard for the devotees and willingness to see positive in others, where we can see our degree of humility is increasing by seeing that. And then the last point is, there are two more points. Accepting Krishna's sanction, either when things are going as per our plan or when things are not as per our plan, how we are able to see Krishna's arrangement in that and accepting that. And then finally, keeping Guru and Krishna in the center while taking any critical decisions of our life. If you are able to think of them and then making the decision, then we can see, okay, we are able to.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And especially it's important to note that even this idea of just keeping Guru and Krishna in the center, at the beginning, the parents really are the first Guru, right? So in some senses. There's still, at whatever stage, that still makes sense, and it's true. It goes across all the different stages. Last one.
Mataji just mentioned that, when the child is younger, we would like to take him away from non-Krishna conscious families. But I got a question, and the question is, when somebody attends public school, how do you do that?
There's a difference between, so the idea is association. So what is intimate association and what is not intimate association? There's still, of course, we all go to work. We, of course, work with other people. The idea is just, as we look at Nectar of Instruction, what are the loving exchanges that we have with these individuals? Is it a matter of actually revealing truly our minds? Is it a matter of doing the full set of exchanges with these people? Or is it a matter of just actually being within the world but not of it? And that's the kind of sense of it. It's, yes, okay, fine, public schools make sense. I went to public school, you're fully aware.
We can minimize the association, but we cannot just take it away.
The idea is, what is the association? The association that we first talk about is really just what is intimate association. Some association is going to be there naturally. It's just where do we put our intimate association is where the real differentiator is. Okay, so I'd just like to summarize and kind of conclude, just because we're nearing the end. And so if you see a lot of these things, it is very true. They kind of do go across the different stages of life. And so when we look at this, we take a look at, as I mentioned before, we have to take a look at what does success mean. And realistically, when we see success, according to the scriptures, real success is stuff that is lasting, not things that are just kind of fleeting. And so this is the difference between nitya sukriti and anitya sukriti. So things that develop the devotion and maintain the devotion are true indicators of success. If it's something that's kind of very fleeting, then it really isn't. So for example, if we take a look at sense gratification, we can say for some little teeny tiny point of time we have some happiness, and then it goes away. So there's some temporariness to it. However, if we're trying to truly develop this sense of devotion, then this devotion kind of keeps growing and growing and increasing throughout our entire lives. As we mentioned before, why do we do this? Well, because there's this enjoyment that is growing unlimitedly. Every stage of this devotion, we have some sort of additional enjoyment that goes through. That's why we continue through this life of devotion. And so again, just to kind of summarize, we've seen so many examples of what a life of devotion really looks like. And what does that mean? We have this pure natural feeling, this natural feeling that comes about towards the Supreme Lord, and that we don't really ask anything of Krishna directly. It's not something that we go, okay, Krishna, please give me my daily bread. Oh, Krishna, please give me this wealth. Oh, please, Krishna, I'm going to die, please save me. Not just that. It's this devotion that we're talking about is unconditional. So that means, as Srila Prabhupada had written or even as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu writes in Shikshashtakam, just like a puppet, make me dance. We may not be at this stage yet, but that is something that a life of devotion really aspires to be. And so we have these examples that we've seen both in the scriptures as well as more contemporary examples. And so we can take a look at that and see what does a life of devotion really truly mean, especially as we consider this within the context of what we've been talking about this weekend, within the 6 angas or the 6 limbs of surrender. And so we see what are these different topics and what does that look like at every stage of life. As we've discussed here, that may be across different stages. But in the end, it's truly just this life of devotion where we spend this entirety of our time going towards this unmotivated sense of devotion. So, if there are not any questions or anything, I'll give it over to Maharaj and Divya Prabhu if they're here to start this.
I know. Right. We don't have a lot of time for this little session.